Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on predictive maintenance, which is called Smarter Maintenance, Smarter Manufacturing, the power of predictive maintenance in Middle East manufacturing. Now, as you can see from today's agenda, we'll be covering some of the core topics of predictive maintenance, and specifically how Senseye can help overcome your business challenges. Now, as you can see from the agenda, you need to make sure that you stay tuned later on as we have a walkthrough on the Senseye Copilot, which is the generative AI capabilities of Senseye. And there you'll see how Gen AI can create conversations between the user, AI, and maintenance experts. And then at the end, we'll have questions, time for any Q&A. So please use the question functionality. We'll collect all your questions together and we'll submit the questions at the end to our experts. Now, talking of our experts, you can see that we have here today with us Johnathan Bonner. He is the head of solution engineering for Senseye Predictive Maintenance. And we have Rakesh D'Souza, who is the digital enterprise service portfolio manager in the Middle East. Now, gents, thanks for your time today. Maybe to kick off today's session and to set the scene, Rakesh, maybe you can start by outlining what are the key challenges that's faced by the process manufacturing industry in the Middle East region?
Thank you very much, James. And yes, we are in the Middle East region, and the Middle East is slightly different from the rest of the world. Yeah, we've got microeconomic trends driving business in the region. And what we've seen in the recent years is certain challenges with the cost of capital, which is continuing to rise, and certain macroeconomic trends that are signaling challenges ahead. Enterprise budgets are under tremendous pressure. We're seeing this with customers in the manufacturing sector as well as the process industries where they're being asked to do more with less, maximizing their bottom line value. So this brings with it opportunities and challenges too. How do you make better sense out of the existing assets and investments that they already have? How do they better manage physical assets with minimum downtime, maximize productivity, and save as much capital as they want? So with this comes Senseye, where we can really optimize the bottom line of our customers, at the same time be more environmentally conscious. And we're going to talk more on how we can support customers in the Middle East with our great portfolio from the Siemens Accelerator. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Rakesh. Thanks for setting the scene. Johnathan, from your side, of course, like Rakesh has set the scene from the Middle East point of view, but what are the benefits of implementing this predictive maintenance in the process manufacturing plants?
Well, really, if you think about what Senseye Predictive Maintenance is, it's a decision support tool made for people in industry. That's maintenance teams, production teams, and so on. And whenever we are trying to assess an environment, we do look at what is the benefits, what is the value, even before we start the project. So typically, we would look at reductions of downtime or the improvements of uptime, making sure that you have more availability to produce. If you can produce it, you can sell it. But then there's also the precise and correct maintenance factor. So for maintenance teams who are quite busy, they are quite reactive, they want to know that all of their efforts are justified, that they're not wasting time doing unnecessary maintenance actions. And more importantly, if it doesn't need maintenance, if it's not absolutely necessary, don't do it. Don't touch it. Don't induce failure by performing maintenance, for example. But also because this is a cloud-based technology, we look to centralize data. So we take data from a range of sources, data that is already existing in a company's infrastructure. So we're centralizing data from both your OT and IT. And because you have a more efficient maintenance practice, you also are driving sustainability. So you have less emergency transportation of spares, which can be quite costly and detrimental to the environment, especially when you're shipping over just one component or one asset, for example. You are using less spares and consumables. You have less time spent idling because a part of the line or a part of your factory has gone down. The benefits are many. Some are to the company, some are to the personnel and individuals working for that company. But predictive maintenance can affect a huge range of those.
Yeah. And so I understand from that sense, there is definitely a difference then between obviously traditional maintenance practices and then the predictive maintenance practices. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And essentially, predictive maintenance is a maintenance methodology. You know, in having a system like Senseye in your environment doesn't give you predictive maintenance. It gives you insight. It gives you information. It can guide your teams. Only once it is actioned out and you've changed your reactive or planned preventative approach do you have predictive maintenance. It's about using the information. We can't come in and install something and suddenly your maintenance practice changes. That we can guide you on that journey, but you have to take action to the information which is provided.
Makes sense. You know, and it'd be interesting just at this point, just for a quick pulse check with our audience. You know, we've already had people tuning in. You know, just to get an idea from you, the people who are watching. You know, what form of maintenance strategy are you taking? So, please, that you should see a poll pop up now. And it'd be good just, you know, just for our speakers, just for the session, just to get an idea of what you see is happening in your business. Okay. So we'll leave that up there for while people start answering, and we'll show you the results in a moment. Okay. While that poll is going on, perhaps Rakesh, you could just from your side, have you got any examples of where you've seen predictive maintenance implications or implementations, the successes or anything?
Yes, I think globally we've done some great jobs. Basically, predictive maintenance has been historically successful in aerospace, automotive, heavy industries, and we've got great successes there. A lot of people don't know. I mean, Siemens is one of the early adopters. A lot of the Siemens factories have AI-based PDM already involved or implemented in several factories globally. So maybe Johnathan can throw in some light on some of these use case examples that we had with some of these industries where we could unlock value for a lot of our customers.
Absolutely. So Senseye at the moment is monitoring tens of thousands of assets globally, millions of data points at a near real-time basis. So very much a global solution being used at scale. So one of our customers, global automotive manufacturer, they started working with Senseye in 2016. Back then, predictive maintenance was a bit of a new topic, a new technology. They weren't too sure on it, but they knew they had to do something. They had some very ambitious goals of reducing downtime, improving OEE. And in automotive, even just 0.5% increase in OEE is huge when you look at the value of that. So Senseye started off on an initial deployment of around 30 assets. By the end of that year, we had scaled to 400. And currently for this company, we're monitoring over 11,000 alone globally across their manufacturing sites. One of the key advantages that they got was a heavy reduction in unplanned downtime. So for the first year and continuing with the scale, it was a reduction of about 50% with, I believe, about a 1% increase in OEE for that. But really for them, they didn't have to install any additional sensing or hardware. We were able to utilize, especially in the beginning, their existing data sets, driving value from what was already on site. Their maintenance teams use Senseye in their morning stand-up. So every morning, the maintenance teams will have a printout of what new notifications have come, and they distribute that, and they have better efficiency in their maintenance practices. So one person who was responsible for an area of 50 assets is now responsible for an area of 500 assets. So you're scaling up a single person's capability. And if you do that over entire teams, that drives huge maintenance efficiencies. Every year, each factory saves many, many, many millions in reduction of unplanned downtime and improved maintenance practices. So that's just one of our customers. Great story at scale. Another example we have is with a steel manufacturer in the UK. We started working with them, again, also on an initial deployment of a small number of assets, and it was their most complex production. They really wanted to test out the technologies. We showed great success in there, but also realized that we weren't dealing with the right people. We needed to reset our project team so that we had engagement, not from a digitization team, but really from our core end users, which is the maintenance team. And once we did that and got engagement and buy-in from their members, the maintenance teams, we were able to then scale to hundreds of assets within a 2 or 3 week period. And again, for them, since using Senseye, it's been many millions saved in maintenance cost reduction, increased production, and so on. And these are just 2 examples. We have many, many, many others in a wide range of sectors.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, just to jump in there, like we've got the results back from our first poll. And as you can see, most of our listeners today are saying that they're in the planned proactive stage. Good to see there is still definitely some in the predictive area, but it's really good to see, and less in the reactive. I guess that's where we want to be with our customers. Yes. Okay. So, John, thanks for giving us some examples there, but maybe you could go into a bit more information around the common technologies which are being used within predictive maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at what enables predictive maintenance from a Senseye perspective, it's data. So first of all, we're looking for condition monitoring data. So this could be pressure, current, torque, vibration, temperature, speed, flow, cycle time, whatever is relevant to identify a normal condition and then highlight signs of abnormal. So very much along the lines of a traditional condition monitoring, but now online. The application also then takes in contextual or operational data, such as speed for a variable speed drive, or a batch identifier for batch production, so that the application can understand what is normal or what is a normal condition under different operating states. And then the third form is maintenance data. So that all of those forms of data enable predictive maintenance. But where does that data come from? Essentially, what we would look to do is use existing data from the infrastructure. So this could be PLCs, drives, inverters that have relevant data in them. It could be the customer could have already online condition monitoring, such as vibration. They may have some edge devices or edge technology. They may have a factory historian, an SQL database, a SCADA system, all with relevant data sets in them. So we would look to leverage those forms. And we also look to integrate with maintenance management systems so that the workflow is integrated as well. You're not necessarily giving the maintenance teams a new technology that they have to log into, but when they come in the morning, they have a look at their new work orders for the day. A part of that will be the new notifications raised by Senseye. So those are the technologies. We look to assess the infrastructure to find relevant forms of data so that we can pull in the correct data, but also push out the correct notifications.
Great. And well, while we're on that topic, we can just launch another quick poll just to see how many of these common technologies, or maybe different technologies, that you're using in your environment. So the poll should be started. Please just enter your answers, and we'll come back with the results later. And while we're waiting for the results, maybe Rakesh, we could quickly just jump to you. From a Middle East perspective, obviously you've been working in the region for quite some time. What kind of cultural or perhaps maybe regulatory compliance or these types of frameworks are either inhibiting or supporting the adoption of these types of technologies?
Yes, that's a good question, actually. If you look at historically or culturally in the region, maintenance schedules have either been circling around estimations on what's the machine's lifetime or what's the projected time to failure, or maybe based on the recommendations from the OEM or the manufacturer. But does this give the real picture? No, this has been traditionally the way it works in the region at the moment. But definitely this is changing at the moment. And we can sense this in almost all our major verticals, that they're trying to improve, customers are trying to improve their maintenance operations. And how are they trying to replace it? They're going to try to replace educated guesses with data-based knowledge. So they're trying to use the data that they already have. The data could be in their ERPs, in their maintenance management systems, or like Johnathan said, in their PLCs, their SCADA. And it's all about unlocking that value that resides in their factories to bring in better insights and transparency. And from a regulatory perspective, yes, Middle East has not been one of the early adopters of cloud. Yeah, and there are reasons for that. One of the reasons would have been the cost of cloud adoption. It was on the higher side compared to the rest of the world. On the other side, regulatory uncertainty. A lot of the countries out here, they do have strict regulations when it comes to cloud adoption. It's like hosting your data in the country, hosting your encryption keys in the country. So that makes it a little too dicey for very critical industries where data has to be exposed to the cloud. For example, an application like Senseye. So, but this is changing. Yeah, you can see this fast changing, at least in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. You're getting very nice, very educated regulatory frameworks for cloud adoption, which is safeguarding at the same time regulating hosting data in country. And not to mention, I mean, if you see in the year 2019, you had AWS enter Bahrain. This was the first country in the Middle East. But that followed up with Microsoft in UAE in the same year. And then you go forward in 22, AWS in UAE. And now you're talking about Microsoft in Qatar. So the big news is in the next 5 years in Saudi Arabia, you would have 5 of the biggest cloud service providers in country. So the outlook for cloud adoption in the region looks very positive. So from a regulatory perspective, this could encourage customers, especially in critical industries, to go into cloud adoption for a lot of the value that it can unlock in the existing manufacturing processes.
Thanks, Rakesh. That's really good. Just now we've got the results in from our last poll. So Johnathan, maybe you'd like to have a quick comment. So you can see, like, we're looking at that middle ground, that 3 to 4 in terms of the common technology. Does that benchmark about right in terms of your customers across the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every factory, every customer, every vertical industry really will have different, I guess, readinesses. If we look at it from a Senseye perspective, how ready are you to implement predictive maintenance? But essentially, yeah, about 3 to 4 is common. You know, those could range. Quite often you find companies will be using some sort of condition monitoring. There is obviously automation, PLCs, drives, inverters, those levels. Quite often factories do have a centralized data storage. Your factory is storing in an SQL database and SCADA systems. It really does depend on what their need is. You know, everything I believe should be based around need. You don't just digitize an environment for the sake of it. You do it because you have a driving factor behind it. So those driving factors will dictate how many of those technologies or will be there existing. But essentially, whenever we get into an environment that is missing a key factor or a key point, as Siemens, we can fill that gap. You know, we are able to come in and help with a full stack solution implemented by experts. So it's regardless of where you're at, even if you are on the 1 to 2 scale, that's not a problem for us at all.
Exactly. I guess it's all about the journey, isn't it? You know, it doesn't matter whereabouts you are. It's about understanding your journey and then what's the next steps. Yeah, not necessarily trying to get as much technology as possible. Yeah.
And just to add further to what Johnathan rightly said is also to identify the right assets that drive the business value for the customer. Yeah, I think a lot of the PDM projects fail because of that, is not identifying the right assets that can really unlock value and probably make the biggest impact. And that's where customers have to be a little more careful when selecting technologies and selecting machines and assets that need to be part of it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna expand on that a little bit, because quite often when we're engaging with our customers, they'll say, "Yeah, we want predictive maintenance and we want it on these assets." And always the first question is, "But why?" Well, no, these selected assets represent our most critical on site. And immediately I have to say, "Oh, hold on a second." So whenever we are doing predictive maintenance initial deployment, you know, your first 12 months, regardless of what you say, the fact is we have to show value. So if we start on your most critical assets, the chances are that they are highly maintained, even over-maintained. The chances of seeing anything degrading or even failing within the first 12 months is very unlikely. So how do we prove the value to you if there's nothing to show you? Rather, within the first 12 months, let's do a mixture of highly critical assets, absolutely, as well as the assets which are costing you the most amount of money. That is in your breakdowns, your unplanned downtimes, your planned and preventative maintenance actions. Let's start with those so we can actually give you value and reductions of those while still covering your most critical assets. But it always has to be driven by value. And how can we prove that value to you? Also, so that you get adoption, not just from the maintenance team, but from the whole business, the decision makers, essentially.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the other topics we're going to cover today, I mean, data analytics, machine learning, huge topics that are covering when we talk about predictive maintenance. So maybe, Johnathan, you can give us a bit more insight into what roles does data analytics and machine learning play for predictive maintenance?
Essentially, it's at the absolute core of predictive maintenance technology. So within Senseye, we use AI and machine learning as part of our understanding of insights. So looking at behavior within data, highlighting those forms of behavior which are concerning, highlighting abnormal state, and then notifying the user of this abnormal with evidence. So that is at the absolute core of it. However, we've also implemented generative AI, which we'll be discussing a little bit more deeply later. But that is the gap between the ordinary person, or I say ordinary person, I mean an ordinary factory worker, maintenance technician, and so on. That's the gap between them and the data analytics. Because really, who's supposed to know what an increase in motor current means, or what does this chart mean? It's very hard to say unless you have been taught and trained and you have experience with that. But with the Gen AI, it takes the need for that training away because it's giving you the relevant information in a format that you understand, spoken word in any language, essentially. But without having that core of data analytics, machine learning, then you essentially just have condition monitoring without any logic behind it. Really what we're wanting to do is bridge that gap, as I said, between the people who are new to this and the experts.
Absolutely. Well, let's just do a quick poll as well, just to find out how our audience uses data and how they're getting value from data. So we'll come back to that a little later on as well. Now, while we're waiting for that, Rakesh, perhaps you can just give us some of your insight. Are there any specific industries within the process manufacturing that would benefit more from predictive maintenance? There's got to be certain industries that this is going to provide huge amounts of value for, that really need to, at the forefront of this, that should be adopting it first.
Exactly. I mean, if you see the early adopters of AI-based predictive maintenance, it was the automotive industry, the aerospace industry. But that's quickly changing. It's moving more down the value chain to energy. It's looking at heavy industries. And what's really bringing this, if you look at it from a vertical perspective, if I can throw in oil and gas, which is one of the major industries in the Middle East, one of the biggest challenges is with lowering cost of maintenance. They are heavily manned installations. Some of the biggest NOCs in the region are really looking at demanning their operations. And when it comes to demanning the operations, it also brings with it the risk of maintaining these assets. It also brings with it the risk of transparency of these assets. So this is one of the biggest challenges. And oil and gas industry plays an important role in the region with in terms of also mitigating risks of environmental disasters. So these are the challenges in the oil and gas industries where we see they could be the pioneers for predictive maintenance in the future. We're quite bullish in the sector. They have challenges with monitoring the condition of the assets remotely because the assets are spread out offshore, onshore, in deep waters, in the most harshest environments you can ever imagine. So oil and gas industry is one of the adopters that we see in this region, and there's a very strong mega trend towards that. Apart from oil and gas, I see the food and beverage industry here. Of course, the food and beverage does not represent a threat to the environment, but it can definitely have an impact on people's health. It's a highly regulated sector, because it's directly responsible directly concerning humans. So we see the food and beverage industry with its growth prospects in the region, with challenges in optimizing their bottom line, and at the same time maximizing their uptime. They have some of the most complex processes. If you really look at the food and beverage industry, you've got machines manufactured by various OEMs. And that brings with it challenge of a very heterogeneous network. So not every plant or factory can afford to have experts sitting out there maintaining these assets. And in the long run, I think it's not about unlocking the value of your assets. It's how to extend the life cycle of your assets. Look at it from a sustainability perspective. ESG is given a very important role, especially after UAE hosted the COP28. You can see that sustainability goals are part of the pillars of the strategic pillars of every customer or every corporate right now. So F&B definitely fits into goal. Apart from this, we've really seen heavy interest coming from the heavy industries and marine. So heavy industries is where you have the big dirty machines sitting out there in the most inhospitable environment, where sending humans would really be. Look at it. Look at James. Look at the weather today. It's 52 degrees out there. So you really cannot have a technician climb up a crane and inspect a motor. And it's getting hotter every year. And global warming is a known aspect. So I would really not generalize on the industries, but we would see these applications going on across discrete industries and process industries alike in the near future. Various factors, various macroeconomic factors, various microeconomic factors, cost of labor going up, cost of capital going up, global warming, sustainability, ESG. So definitely, yes, AI-based PDM like the one that Senseye offers definitely fits in that bill.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point. Looking just beyond your plant, looking beyond your like immediate operations into like the global point of view. It's especially like you said, ESG. These factors are increasing all the time, and this plays a huge role, and that can help those kind of those policies that you're having internally. Now, we've got the results back from our next poll as well. Just looking through, so it looks like in terms of how our customers are using data, we're in that kind of the medium maturity stage, which kind of I think would make sense, really. I think, Rakesh, would you say that's true from when you're talking with customers in that kind of?
Yeah, I think the maturity of organizations is a very important aspect. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of the ITTI index. It's an industrial transformation index launched by UAE. They're one of the pioneers, and it's an index that's been developed to identify and assess the maturity of an organization for Industry 4.0. And it also opens the door for incentivizing customers to really leapfrog on the Industry 4.0 adoption. So ITTI is being designed in UAE especially. It's also being right now rolled out in Qatar, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia. And one of the key elements of this is to actually look at the maturity of industries in the region and where do they stand, where do they need to be. It's kind of a gap assessment where companies like Siemens can play a very important role.
Rakesh, I have a question for you just based on that ITTI scoring. Does that in any way drive how companies are looking at making data available and using that when it comes to new factories, your greenfield sites and installations? Because from my experience, when companies are planning and building and commissioning and these greenfield sites, they're focused on mostly production outcomes. And then when it comes down to looking at further technologies, other transformation projects, they realize, if only we had just stated that we needed more, we had future visions, and they should have provisioned for that. So does the ITT index at all drive some of that?
I think, it's currently driving brownfield assets, but in future for greenfield projects, you're bringing in very interesting incentives. For example, providing golden visas. For example, reducing the cost of capital. So if you're an Industry 4.0 ready factory, you're adopting the top principles of Industry 4.0, you would be incentivized by getting preferred or a better subsidized finance from the Emirates Development Board for that particular factory. So yes, it's going to be win-win for companies. On one side, they see the productivity improvements. On the other side, they see lower cost of capital. So it's a very promising future, the ITTI in place.
Yeah, interesting. I just also want to add on to that we have one of our customers use the fact that they have Senseye in their environment to negotiate better insurance premiums, because they're able to go and say, well, we're covered. We have this monitoring. We're getting huge amounts of value. We are essentially at less risk of something catastrophic happening. And just that alone is worth huge amounts of money in value. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's anything that reduces the risk is something profitable for insurance companies. So it's another win-win balance out there. Yeah. I've also seen this disruption in offering of anything as a service. Yeah, and that's also really kind of a disruption in the future. So anyone that owns the asset would want to monitor and maintain it. So that's also moving into the packaging industry. So we would see some interesting developments in the sector.
Right. Now, I am conscious that we're running out of time, and we definitely want to do this walkthrough with the Copilot. But before we do, maybe just to close out, and I want to hear from both of your sides. How, for our listeners today, what would be the if they're not really into the predictive maintenance field yet, what would you recommend for both your sides in terms of the first steps, or how can they progress their strategy when it comes to predictive maintenance?
So, first of all, identify your need. What is it that you're trying to solve? Do you have maintenance inefficiencies? Do you have high costs of maintenance? Is your production output suffering? So identify that first, and then you can contact Siemens for the experts to guide you through. So, this is done. This is done as a free consultancy, essentially, so that we can understand, are you ready? But we can guide you through the entire process. So that is to even further define the value, make sure that we are looking at the right areas to run through feasibility, understand who within your environment has the right skills to be a part of the project team, and really set you up on the entire pathway. And, with regional support like Rakesh and team, you can have people on site with you throughout the entire Middle East region. But yeah, I would also say, let the experts guide you. Don't go in and say, oh, I think I know what we should be doing, and then want to run everything yourself, because that leads to problems. But let the experts guide you, and we can, run you through it the way it should be done.
Right. And Rakesh, from your side, what can companies do to get starting blocks?
Yeah. When you look at this portfolio, we're not really selling a product, or we're not selling a black box. Yeah, what comes with it is a complete knowledge platform. So, as Johnathan rightly said, we drive a workshop where we look at the value and benefits that the customer gets in. Yeah, then we look at his objectives and what are the constraints, and then we plan the implementation in keeping in mind what are the value and benefits and objectives and constraints. So it's kind of a closed loop self-improvement system that and during the whole course of the journey, we keep the customer in our mind. Yeah. So we do this workshop, we look at the value proposition, and we put it on the table. So definitely, yes, please reach out to us if you have an interesting project where you've identified your assets, and we are here to support you on this. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rakesh. Nicely summarized there. Well, I think we've kind of come to the end of our conversation. We've gone through the talking points. We have got some questions come through. We'll put those on at the end. But before we go to those questions, Johnathan, maybe we'll take this time now to do the Copilot walkthrough, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we do have a quick video. Why we just before we start the video, perhaps, Johnathan, you just want to give us a quick introduction about what people are seeing here.
Absolutely. So what you see now, the thumbnail of the screen, is essentially the Senseye application. The application has got really good functionality around your data analytics and machine learning. But what we're talking about is the generative AI, what we call Senseye's Copilot. So when people think of Gen AI, the first name or brand is OpenAI, ChatGPT. Essentially, we have our own containerized with very, very up-to-date large language models. And we are feeding it with specialist information to supplement that capability. So not only has it been trained on the entire works of the internet as much as it can get its hands on, we're also feeding in very specific bits of information. So first off, what it does is it acts like a historian for an asset, but from the perspective of a reliability engineer. It's like having a reliability engineer who's only ever worked on this one asset and can present the user with relevant information from its past about what is happening now. So giving you relevant information up front. But then you can also talk to it and ask it questions. This is based off of just the generalized large language models. What we're going to be showing now is the ability for us to add in expert knowledge in the form of documentations. So this is user manuals, maintenance manuals, spare parts lists. And when talking to the Senseye Copilot about these assets, you can ask it very specific bits of information. So what is happening in this most recent case is the question that's come up, and it's literally telling you what is happening there now. Again, as I mentioned earlier, bridging that gap between the average maintenance personnel and data analyst. It is presenting them with the knowledge that they need to know, regardless of the charts. Leave the data charts alone. It's telling you. But it is also then referencing very specific bits of information around this asset, its operation. It can reference images. It can pull out schematics. And more importantly, when you start looking at, you want to now centralize your knowledge into one place, you could ask it, what is the parts number for the drive end bearing? Because you're going to go replace it. And it will reference that. You don't have to now search in a different system. It is here. This also allows companies who, let's say, maybe have maintenance manuals or user manuals in different languages. They can pull them in regardless of the language and access that information in their native language. So maybe your maintenance manuals or user manuals come through in Swedish for whatever reason, and you want to speak to it in German. That is no problem at all. Essentially, this is bridging the skills gap in a massive way. The way that I see it is that the receptionist can now become a maintenance planner by having access to this tool. And it is continuously learning. So you can start to reference and have conversations between maintainers. You can have notes, and it will learn from all of these interactions along with all the feedback that you give the application as standard. Yeah, as we can see here, it's pulling out schematics of the particular machine in question. We also have industrial, safeguarding and safety rails in place. So you can't ask it random questions. It understands that it has to give you information related to maintenance, assets, predictive maintenance. You can't ask it what is the recipe for a pie, for example. Rakesh, in your experience, though, looking at what is available now, how do you see this benefiting the customers in the Middle East?
I mean, interestingly, Johnathan, there have been quite a few customers who've, with the explosion of Gen AI in every application, customers are asking, what are you doing about Open AI? What's Siemens' strategy on it? Because we are looking at adopting it on our business processes, yeah? But they're yet to move into the manufacturing and operations processes. And a lot of our customers are actually digitalizing some of the assets. The very simple thing is operation manuals used to be in files, in folders, kept in a warehouse. At the time of, say, the D-Day, when there's a breakdown of the machine, they spend more time in tracing the file than in actually running through the file. Yeah, and that's when we get a service call. It's like, hey, Mr. Siemens, can you help us solve this problem? And it's all about getting a fault code for a drive for one of the pumps. And so the potential is immense. It's all about unlocking that value that they have.
And also making it all readily available so that you don't need to go to the file room and search through that big list and hopefully find the right one, only to then have to go through the manually. And
absolutely. And it's near real time. Yeah. So it's
absolutely. So those responses, as you saw, they came through very fast. You may think that the video was sped up, but it wasn't. That is the response time of what we have available now.
Johnathan, how long has this been up and running for?
The Copilot is in a more basic functionality that has been available now for a few months. The ability to add in the expert knowledge is available. However, it's not released because we are thoroughly testing it. We do a rolling rollout We'll select one or two of our key customers, the ones that we know will give us honest feedback, who don't mind hurting our feelings, to make sure that it is operating the way that it should. That there aren't any funny surprises that come on down the line. And then once we are absolutely 100% confident, what you've seen now will then be rolled out. But we're expecting this to happen within weeks, not necessarily months.
Right. So we're still learning as the AI is learning as well then, yeah?
Very much so.
Good. Okay. We are coming to the end of the session, and I just want to make sure there's a couple of questions that have come through, so I just want to make sure that we get these answered before we close, if that's okay. So the first question that we've got up from, I think, Kian, he's saying, what are the challenges with integrating different systems and data sources?
Biggest challenge from my perspective and my experience is that a lot of systems have different communication protocols that don't necessarily natively communicate or speak to each other. So the biggest challenge is you have to find something to bridge that gap. Hopefully you can find one solution that bridges all of the different gaps. But if you just look at just pure automation, you may have Siemens or Beckhoff or Rockwell, Allen Bradley, ABB, all with different communication protocols, all with different formats and function blocks and so on. So it's about getting the relevant information from there into a centralized place, which there are solutions for. But the more different communications you need to integrate, essentially, the cost does go up because you now need to install additional solutions and so on. But really, the quickest way to bridge that gap is initially try and centralize your data. Try and get it centralized, all of it centralized into one point, so that whatever system you're wanting to integrate with or add on into your infrastructure, your architecture, it has one communication pathway, not 17.
So that goes back to what we were saying again, what stage you're at in the journey. Maybe you need to clean up, get the basics done first before you start, implementing the different types of technologies. Okay. And then we've got one other question here. We've got, can you please outline the steps for deploying Senseye? What is involved in terms of time and resources?
Yeah. I will start with the resources first. So typically, you could have up to about 17 members in a project team, or types of characters. We look for 5. So there's 5 key characters that we look for. So that is a project sponsor, someone who has high-level decision-making. They can pull on additional resource if and when necessary. We need maintenance representation from the very beginning because essentially they are our desired end user. So we want their input from the very beginning, also so that they don't have something thrust upon them, that they're a part of creating this solution. We need a PDM champion, someone who is going to be responsible for day-to-day progress of the initial designing, deploying, and implementation. We need then OT and IT representation because, as I've said, we want to get access to the existing data and the IT help make that data available to the cloud. So those are the characters. And what do you need? Essentially, the resource. You need to be able to give the key characters. You don't need to have the infrastructure. You don't need to have sensors in place. You just need to have the resource. People are the most important factor, and we can help guide you with the rest of it. We also have a very, very structured approach on every phase, every step, with documentation, with workshops, with guides, with video tutorials that we use internally, but we also give access to our users so that they can learn from it, the first implementation, and then essentially scale up at a later stage without us, if they would like to.
That's a good point. What I was going to follow up with as well is that in the training. It sounds like it could be quite a big jump for some people to go from manual to predictive. But Rakesh, I'm sure like the team at hand here as well regionally will be available to support all the customers in terms of onboarding, the training to develop.
Because to be frank, we are also maturing as an organization. Yeah, we were going on from we do provide preventive maintenance. We provide reactive maintenance. So we are in that customer journey. We are trying to mature as an organization along with our customers. So we're building the in-house competence. It's also the mindset, and that's happening hand in hand. Yeah, so definitely we are on that path to address concerns of customers across the Middle East. Yeah?
Absolutely. Great. Well, those were all the questions that we had, and it's exactly at 2:45 here, so we've hit our time limit, spot on. Rakesh, Jonathan, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. The information I think will be very useful for all our listeners. The recording will be available, so if anyone tuned in halfway late, you can get the recording later. Okay, and of course, please do reach out to Rakesh or to Jonathan if you do have any specific questions. They'll always be at hand. Okay. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Rakesh. Bye now.